Hello and welcome back to another episode of Between the Lines with the West Virginia Coalition to End Homelessness. This is our podcast where we go beyond the headlines to talk about what's actually happening in the homelessness sector here in the state of West Virginia. And it is my honor, my privilege to have the HMIS team, also doubling as the pit crew, back with me today. And we are going to touch on the 2026 pit count roundup. So guys, just for anyone who maybe didn't catch our last episode, could we go around and introduce ourselves and kind of the role that you all play?
Sure. I'm Matt Hedrick. I'm the Chief Data Officer with the West Virginia Coalition to End Homelessness and the West Virginia Balance of State.
I am Stephanie Leap. I am an HMIS specialist. I work underneath Matt with my other two colleagues on the call.
I'm Megan Deskins, and I'm also an HMIS specialist that works underneath Matt.
And I'm Joshua Kearns, an HMIS specialist who, surprise, surprise, works underneath Matt.
Wow, Matt, what a team you have.
I sure do.
So 2026 PIT, and just as a reminder for anyone listening, PIT is shorthand for the point in time count. Would anyone be willing to just give me a brief overview definition of what that means for anyone who maybe isn't familiar?
Sure. Well, the point in time count is an annual census of people experiencing homelessness within a COC or a continuum of care in their jurisdiction. It's mandated by HUD to occur every year in the last 10 days in January. And it's done all over the nation during that time frame. And really, it's just a snapshot of what homelessness looks like within any given area. It's a census, and there's two components to it. There's a sheltered count that occurs of folks that are staying in a shelter on the night of the count, and that could be an emergency shelter or a seasonal cold weather shelter or a victim service provider, domestic violence shelter. And also the unsheltered count, which are folks that are living on the street in a place not meant for habitation or an abandoned building, things of that nature within the service area. And with the balance of state, since we cover such a large part of the state, we cover 44 of the 55 counties, we strive to have coverage in every single county within our service area, but it's not without its challenges. So we try to do that. And this year we kind of had a bit of a snag because we had a big weather event that occurred during the last 10 days in January. And a lot of CCs across the country experienced this as well. So we had to ask HUD if we could move the count to February 25th. And they approved it. And so that's when we delayed the count this year till the 25th of February.
Thank you for that rundown. And just a real quick note, if anyone would like to get into a little bit more detail about what the count is, who is counted, who isn't, you can check out our previous podcast episode referencing this topic where we get a little bit more in the weeds about the specifics. But Matt mentioned the weather event, and that is true for anyone who lives here locally. I'm sure you remember the end of January. We got a pretty old-timey snow. It reminded me of the types of winters we used to have when I was a kid. It was something we haven't had in a few years. So with the reschedule, how do you guys feel that affected kind of the count? Were you seeing that there was kind of a wind taken out of the sails a little bit, or do you think things pretty well continued on the way they would have had we not had that reschedule?
I really want to shout out all of our volunteers and our county captains because, we all, that was always a concern with that when that snow hit, because as you said, real classic snowstorm. And we were getting a little bit of feedback in advance of what the plan was. So when we made the decision to delay it to the end of February, really wasn't that big of a change as far as like volunteers. We had maybe a handful of people just have to drop out because they had other things going on in their lives, and at that time, other hangups that came in. So but we had a solid crew with our county captains, our team leads this year, who stood fast and volunteer. The volunteer portal kept opening up and kept getting more and more people as we marched closer to that date. So if anything, may have helped bolster, may have just helped overall with the count.
And then Stephanie, I know you were about to speak. Did you have a point as well?
I was going to piggyback off of Josh. We did lose some volunteers, which is absolutely understandable. But everybody that did show up did an awesome job at finding the people and, getting everybody counted. And as Matt would say, we did have a little bit of a smaller turnout than what we expected. We did watch on what we call the command center, which is just the back end of the Counting Us app. And it was more like we're used to every year seeing stuff flow in constantly, and it was kind of more trickling at the beginning, but at the end it just started booming out. It was crazy. But yeah, there's a little bit more of a smaller turnout than what we're used to, which is absolutely fine. We're grateful for anybody that does volunteer, and we understand that things happen when you have a switch in dates.
Yeah. And I don't know if any of you guys have the exact numbers in front of you, but if we wanted to give kind of a ballpark on average year volunteer totals versus volunteer totals we might have seen this year, what's kind of the best estimate to look at for that?
This year we had 1,129 unique responses, which represents individuals experiencing homelessness across the state. And overall, that's a 7% increase from 2025. So we're seeing some growth, but not stabilization yet. So when we say increase, it's important to remember that this reflects both the real numbers, but also outreach and coverage and the amount of coverage that we were able to get this year.
Right. And I think that's a really good point. And I know this is something that we had touched on when we all met and talked about this last time. Just the fact that a lot of people see this number and they want to take this number, the 1,129 responses, they want to take that number and say, okay, so West Virginia right now in the Balance of State COC has exactly 1,129 people experiencing homelessness, no more, no less. And we had kind of touched a little on in our last episode how that might not always be accurate, that there is going to be some flux with that. So would anyone kind of like to just jump in real quick and examine, again, as a refresher, the folks in situations that would be counted in this, folks who wouldn't be, and kind of how that process works on the back end when you guys are filtering out surveys?
Sure. Actually, I have the volunteer numbers now too. Sorry, I thought I had them before, but yeah, in 26 we had 323 volunteers. That's folks that downloaded the app and then in 25 we had 331. So we didn't have that big of a drop this year compared to last year, which is great. But as far as the folks that are counted versus the ones that aren't, I mean, of course, anyone that's staying in a shelter on that night gets surveyed to the best the best of the ability of the staff at the shelters or volunteers that go into the shelters to conduct the census. Now, of course, it's not mandatory that they take part in the program participants take part, the shelter guests take part in the survey. So that might not be a super accurate, one-to-one comparison of surveys. But as far as the people that are on the street for the unsheltered count, of course, anybody, again, it's not a mandatory thing. Anybody it's a voluntary activity to take part in the census survey. But there's also a component that we run into sometimes where we have an observation tool that that we utilize in the event that somebody might be asleep or they might not want to take part, but we can verify 100% that they are experiencing homelessness. And so those numbers can sometimes be skewed by folks that might be a little overzealous and thinking that everybody they see on the street is experiencing homelessness, and that's not true. Also, we have to tend to kind of filter out duplicates that occur. So if you get surveyed here, then you get surveyed somewhere else, we can go into the app and deduplicate those counts. But it's so there's sort of a process there that, you know, to kind of clean up the data to make sure it's at least the most accurate reflection we could get.
Okay. So looking strictly at the numbers, and again, referencing that total that Megan had mentioned with 1,129 unique responses. And those are coming from 43 out of the 44 counties. As a side note, really quickly, which was the one county in the COC that we were not able to cover?
I believe that was Pendleton County.
Pendleton.
Yeah.
Okay. So of the 43 counties, and that's excluding Pendleton County, of our collective COC, we had 700 unsheltered surveys, 429 sheltered surveys. I am very curious to know from your all's perspective on the back end side of things, what happens when you have a volunteer who has identified someone, they are engaging with that person. Maybe the person initially agreed to do the survey, but then was only willing to give certain information. So maybe they agreed to talk, but they were only willing to give their name, where they stayed last night. They weren't willing to give any other information on the survey. Is that still counted as a completed or a finished survey, or does that then get kicked over to that observational count that Matt had referenced?
Generally, if somebody is willing to give like their name and, you know, have a conversation with a volunteer and they are like outdoors and the volunteer can verify that, we usually don't kick that over to observations. Observations are mainly for people who are just not willing to speak and they are observing somebody who may potentially be homeless. Now, the observations are not like included in the actual PIT results. We just keep those for, you know, us. Yes, name and age range is primarily what we need.
Okay, perfect. So we're kind of looking at, I've got some of the results pulled up here, which, by the way, if you're listening, the HMIS team put together a beautiful graphic with a lot of this data laid out super clearly. We have that posted to our Facebook page. I can always reshare that if there's interest. But looking down through some of the totals here, let's look at our top 5 lineup. So these are the counties that experienced the most survey results coming in on the night of the PIT. And from least to greatest in that top 5, tied for the number 5 spot, each with 65 unique responses, we had Harrison and Marion. I find that interesting because they're neighboring counties. So, and then also in the North Central region, coming in at number 4 with 107 unique responses, we had Monongalia County. Coming in at number 3 with 108 unique responses, we had Raleigh. And then taking second place with 152 unique responses, we had Berkeley. And then number 1 with the most unique responses the night of the 2026 PIT, we had Wood County with 237 unique responses. I am really interested to hear from this team who has historically been working on the PIT count for several years now. Were any of those surprising? Was there anything that stood out to you in kind of those top 5 rounded counties? Or rather, I suppose 6, since Harrison and Marion were tied.
I'll say one thing. I was kind of thinking Mon County was a little bit lower than what it has usually been. I thought we would have a little bit more peak of numbers there. That was kind of surprising to me. Wood County is not really too shocking. They're usually almost the highest county every time we do the PIT. I did not expect it to get to 237, to be quite frank. But those Wood County is kind of normal, but Mon County kind of shocked me, and I'm assuming it might be due to volunteers, or and sometimes in February it's kind of more of warmer weather, so sometimes it's a little bit harder to find people too, so it could be a mix of things.
This year too, Raleigh County, I mean, the 5 counties that we mentioned have traditionally been our highest counties. They're also counties with the highest, our biggest population areas within our COC. But Raleigh County wasn't in the list last year, but they were this year, so that was kind of a surprise. But then they had a large shelter that had closed. They also had a more concerted count this year than they have in years past, and that can impact the numbers a lot. So the more volunteers you have, the more folks going out, they might just run into more people and have a more thorough count. And so kind of those factors kind of probably contributed a little bit to that rise. But yeah, the 5 counties, Wood, Berkeley, Mon, Harrison, and Marion are usually in that top 5. But again, those are our big population areas.
Looking in on Monongalia specifically, it was mentioned that one was maybe a little bit of a surprise, a little bit of a shock to see the number that Monongalia had. I'm really curious, when looking at this data, obviously we have the amount of volunteers who were able to survey. We have the time of year. We have that reschedule to take into consideration. We also, I think it would be interesting to look at, as Matt mentioned with Raleigh County, the availability of emergency shelter, the availability of warming shelters in a given time. And I'm interested to know what your guys' take on this is. With the slightly lower numbers in Monongalia, could that also be indicative of just service providers doing the work and getting people housed and having less people on the street? I mean, where do you think the balance comes when looking at all of these factors when you're trying to read these trends year to year?
It most definitely does. I mean, that's always a consideration. That's actually the most ideal situation when you do see that drop, is from people getting housed, and that's what we hope. And I mean, but those factors again contribute, like you said, volunteers, the amount of effort that's out there on the night of the count, but also the number of available shelter, because we did have a very large warming shelter in Mon County this year. We normally do have warming shelters in Monongalia County, but this year we had an additional one that we're serving a lot of people, and the unsheltered count's usually a bit easier to kind of get numbers for, because folks are right there. But I think it is also it is reflective of that, those numbers decreasing slightly due to people getting housed, and that's why we're here. So that's why it works great.
Yeah, and with that, I kind of wanted to segue into the trend percentages that we do have, that we can confirm right off the top. And I believe it was Matt, I believe you mentioned it maybe at the top here, but we did see a 7% total increase since 2025. But interestingly, while we did see a 12% increase in individual persons, we actually saw a 21% decrease in family comprised households. I find that stat really interesting. And again, I'm curious what factors you guys think may have played into that trend, because Frankly, a 21% decrease is really nice to see. That's almost a quarter of a percentage decrease in observed family homelessness. So are there any notes on that might kind of play into that trend?
No, I believe we are housing and decreasing. That's one where I believe we are decreasing family homelessness in those areas, and that's reflective in that. And I think that's kind of, yeah, that's one that when we were looking at the data that I was most pleased about to see.
And I think that's also, I mean, you can never take any statistic by itself. It needs to be observed with other trends and other factors that are occurring. In West Virginia, I know over the past few years, we have successfully been able to decrease specifically youth homelessness by, I think, nearly 30%. That was referenced in a congressional report recently. So I'm wondering if that is kind of playing into that as well, if those are youths and households. It's just interesting to think about, interesting to kind of look at all of the numbers side by side.
Interestingly enough, too, we had a 21% decrease from 24 to 25 and a 21% decrease, the exact same amount from 25 to 26. So,
wow, that's amazing. Now, I'm going to be the voice of the layman in the audience here. So, Matt, you're telling me that there was a 24% decrease, and then the following year there was a 21% increase. That's very close to a margin of a 50% decrease in what we're seeing family comprised homelessness. So why are there still unhoused families? What's going on? If all these numbers are decreasing, there's almost 50% less is what you're telling me here based on the PIT. Why am I still seeing households or family units who might be unhoused in my community?
I wish we could tell you. But yeah, it's also one thing to take into consideration is we tend to survey. I mean, we see a decrease, but also we start out with, there's a lot less surveys that occur for families. So that might be what that decrease is, but there's a couple considerations there, I guess, too. I mean, we do count, a lot of families will, be sheltered in hotels. And we count the folks that are in hotels paid for with a voucher, but there might be a situation of, families, especially during this time of year, or during the time when the count occurs, are doubled up, and we don't, of course, include that in the count. That doesn't fall under the HUD definition of homelessness, but that's a consideration. But also they might be staying in a hotel that they're paying for, which isn't an ideal situation, and neither's being doubled up, but they kind of get missed in the count. Because they're technically not considered homeless at that point, but it's a very hard housing situation to be in, and so that might be reflective of that. But I wish I could tell you why it's still there, but it's, yeah.
Well, I also imagine, just to that note, if there are individuals who are self-paying at a hotel or motel, or if there are folks who are doubling up with friends and family, even if we could count them, those people would be really difficult to track down, because you don't know that they are experiencing homelessness. You may not know that they're there or their location.
Okay.
So that is an interesting consideration. And I do think it's interesting that even with the 21% decrease in family household homelessness, that is still with the understanding that there was an overall 7% total increase. So again, just a reminder to the listeners that cherry picking any one stat is probably not going to give you the best reflection of the reality. These things really need to be taken into consideration as a whole. with you all, can you kind of explain just to folks listening at home who maybe they've never volunteered with us before, maybe they've never worked in this field, they've never participated in a PIT count in any capacity, the night of the count, we've got teams of volunteers out canvassing. What are you all doing on the back end? What is the behind the scenes for the actual night of the count?
I can speak into that a little bit. But one big thing that we're doing is we're watching those surveys come in, just double checking for duplicates. And we're also there to support any team leads that might have issues coming up. We try to be available to them because we know that it can be a chaotic time. So we're calling people if we need to, and we're also getting on a call ourselves. So we're also, we're all in a meeting, watching the surveys, discussing it with each other, and trying to update everyone through social media as well. You've been a big help with that, Ashley.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Was there anything, did we notice, because this is something I've actually been curious about when you guys are watching these surveys roll in. I know that the PIT count is a 24-hour period. Do you find that you get most of your results observably rolling in during that night? Or do you find that more of the results start coming in kind of within the business hour portion of the following day?
It can be a mixed bag. Really, it's we found that the sheltered count, of course, comes in during the day, during the business hour portion of the next day. But as far as the unsheltered count goes, I mean, it's always best to really, we found that the best time to survey someone is either in the evening when they're settling in for the night, which of course, being in the wintertime, that's usually in that 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock hour, or when they're first waking up or starting their day, and that's usually a very early hour of the following day. So that between 6 and 8, kind of in that realm, we find that a lot of surveys come in during that time as well.
Okay, and then there is a small window, correct? After the initial 24-hour period, there is a little bit of a window for any straggling surveys to be submitted. Is that accurate?
Yeah, there's a 10-day window after the PIT has officially closed that if you are a volunteer and you are talking with somebody that's experiencing homelessness and you're able to confirm that they were homeless on the night of the point in time count, that you can still submit a survey and that be counted for that purpose.
Okay, so we have the initial 24-hour period, then we have a 10-day exception window. So after those kind of, let's collectively say 11 days, at what point do you guys as a team start going in and tallying everything and getting this information consolidated?
We start right during the count, really. We're kind of looking at stuff as things come in. So it's sort of a process right from the jump at 4 p.m. on the day the count starts. Kind of our data cleanup part begins, but it really does in the couple weeks after the count. That's really the busiest time for that. So we that window's still open, but even after it closes, we work on deduplicating, trying to get those numbers at least in draft form out, and then once those are finalized, of course, we update we have a couple visualizations that we do. We like to update, compile those numbers, because ultimately we also have a big report we have to get to HUD, and we submit that, and it's actually due at the end of April.
Okay, so that's due at the end of April. We already have kind of the beautiful like overview graphic that you guys put together, and we have that out on our social medias. You can contact us if you would like that information. In terms of the actual data page on our website, Do we have any clue for the people at home when that might be updated with the 2026 numbers?
We're hoping very, very soon, within a couple of weeks.
Okay, wonderful. I know that there were a few community members who were really interested to see kind of their specific counties totals for this year. And if you are one of those people, please know that when we do get that data page updated on the website, that's going to be your best place to kind of click around and explore the actual individual counties outside of those highest population, kind of top 5 or 6 that we already have listed here. And then are there any kind of closing notes or thoughts about the count this year, how it went, the results, anything that's coming to mind for you all that you'd like to throw in before we close today?
We would like to, of course, like Josh mentioned earlier, thank our volunteers. They're the backbone of how this works, and we couldn't conduct this without them. We cover such a large area, and our county captains, which is what we call our kind of the folks that lead a county effort, and our volunteers that went out and braved the cold to help us with the point in time this year, and every year they do, and as well as the HMIS team. These guys, they do a lot, and it's really, really appreciated all the effort that's put in for that. And you, Ashley, as well, for all the social media and things like that you've handled this year. Go ahead, Megan. Sorry.
Oh, yes, we absolutely appreciate you, Ashley, so much and everything that you've been doing. I also want to say that, we are seeing some shifts with more individuals, fewer families, and some stronger volunteer engagement. But the need for stable and affordable housing is still very real across West Virginia. And that's one thing that we just want to keep reiterating as we share things about the point in time count.
Yeah, and I think kind of piggybacking off of that, Megan, as we close today, it is a good reminder that these numbers are not stagnant. They can change. We can see decreases across the board, but what it's going to take to kind of preclude that is more available, affordable housing. And so if you are a listener, if you are a community member who is passionate about this, who would like to see these numbers continue to decrease, please reach out to us. You can volunteer in any capacity that you are able. You can donate, whether material items or monetarily, but also if you're just interested in getting some advocacy materials, to contact your elected representatives to let them know that affordable housing is something that is high priority for the constituents in this state. That's something we can also help you navigate as well. I just wanted to kind of put that plug. So thank you, Megan, for bringing that up. I do want to give kind of a final closing thank you to this whole team. I mean, the HMIS team, doubling as the PIT team. Listeners at home, I don't think you understand all of the back work that's going into not only compiling this data, putting it together, but making sure it's accurate, making sure it's understandable, making sure it's digestible and available. That takes a lot of work and a lot of time. And I want to thank you guys so much for the effort that you put into making sure that the people in our COC stay informed when it comes to this information. We've already thanked the volunteers. And as a final close, I also just want to thank the communities themselves. I know, especially when I was out surveying, I don't know that we would have been able to find some of the individuals we did had it not been for the help of community members who were open and willing to the cause. So maybe they didn't have the time or the ability to volunteer, to go out and canvass, but they were fully prepared to help us, point us in the right direction, give us kind of hubs of operation when we got too cold and needed to come in out of the wild. So thank you to the communities, the volunteers, just across the board. We pulled off another one, guys, and despite a slightly lower volunteer base, I think we did a pretty good job. So thank you all so much. To our listeners, thank you for tuning in. If you'd like any more additional information regarding the PIT, I want to point you to our social media pages where you can find us under WVCEH or the West Virginia Coalition to End Homelessness. And I'd also like to point you to the data page on our website, which you can find at wvceh.org/data, or go to the main page and find the data page at the top. So thank you so much for listening. We hope you have a great day, and we'll see you next time.